Welcome back to the newsroom here at France 24. It's time for our daily dose of culture. 50 years ago today, the writer Albert Camus died in a car accident. He was only 47 years old, but already a world-famous literary figure and winner of the Nobel Prize. 50 years on, the anniversary of his death has unleashed fresh controversy. Our cultural trends editor Sylvain Beaumont is here to tell us more about his legacy. Sylvain.
Yes, Camus has been in the news over the past weeks with Nicolas Sarkozy, who said that he wished Camus to be pantheonized, as we say in French. That means that his body, or what is left of it, is to be moved from the cimetière in Lourmarin, the south of France, to the Panthéon. That's a former church in the heart of Paris where all the great men and very few women actually are buried, the great men of the Republic. And this has given a controversy, and people were sort of opposed to it, and even Camus' son, actually.
Exactly, because, I mean, seeing that he is such a famous literary figure, it seems like a good idea, but there's a whole lot of controversy, as you say.
Yes, the controversy with the children of Camus, but also I'm not sure it's such a good idea, because we could say in other ways that Camus has been already pantheonized in many ways just after his death, because he was, as you said, the Nobel Prize winner, and then his dramatic death made him like a kind of a hero. And for people my generation who were born just a few years after Camus' death, he always has been in the official list. He always has been in the canon, you know, in the schools. My own high school was named after Camus. It opened in the late 60s. So Camus was always a compulsory reading part of the canon. And I think maybe it's not such a good idea for the man who wrote the Homme Révolté, for example.
And there's also talk of another, you mentioned pantheonized before, but there are also a lot of fears that he will be museified, another interesting verb. What are people talking about here?
Well, we're talking about the fact that his work has been buried over official recognition very early on already. As I said, he's probably the writer who is the most associated with the school system here. And that was mocked a long time ago already by the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu, who noted the fact that he was a philosopher for high school classes, and that was even the title of an essay by another literary critic. So Camus was always mocked by that, and for us it was strange the way foreigners actually considered Camus, and even rock bands. I remember, you know, The Cure, when they wrote the title "Killing an Arab." It was an homage to Camus, and it always felt strange for us pupils in the high schools here, because we had the impression that it was not the same Camus. There was even a rock band in the post-punk area called The Fall, after one of Camus' novels, and the leader, Marky Smith, I remember interviewing him in the early 80s, and he told me that he actually picked the name. It was a joke, because Camus was a good goalkeeper. So Camus was not as serious abroad than it was here, very compulsory and sometimes boring for pupils in the school system.
So it's, in a way, it's all about being cool here.
Well, this has to do with school. I mean, you have to remember also that there was a brand of T-shirt in the UK that launched philosophy T-shirt, it was called, that launched a shirt number 1 after Camus because he was a goalkeeper. But well, that's for the fun, but it has something more serious to it also. There is another thing I remember. When I went to Belfast in the mid-90s, I met a whole generation of young, fine writers there. Robert McLean Wilson, Carlo Gebler, Glenn Patterson, all of them were deeply influenced by Camus. And this had nothing to do with the fact that they had to learn Camus at school. This had to do with the situation they always lived in, and the question of violence in Northern Ireland. And I think they found something helpful in Camus' novels and also essays. And I think it's the good way to handle Camus. And I think rather than to put him in the Pantheon, we have to reread Camus again with different eyes from the ones we had as pupils in the school.
And looking ahead, do you think that this controversy will continue, or will people eventually see that maybe this is a sort of a storm in a teacup?
Well, I'm not sure it will continue, because the ball is in the side of Camus' children. And apparently, while his daughter was willing for the body to be moved to the Pantheon, the son did not agree. So if there is a veto there, then that's the end of the controversy.
All right. Thanks very much for now, Sylvain. And staying with Albert Camus now, the writer is known as a French literary icon, of course, but he was actually born in Mondovi in Algeria. Surprisingly, perhaps there will be no commemorations today in his birthplace, but yet his memory lives on.
Here I understand what we call glory, the right to love without measure.
Words written by Albert Camus, carved into a pillar in the middle of the ancient Berbero-Roman ruins of Tipaza. Camus said Tipaza was inhabited by the god. But if he came here to reflect with the ancients, it was in Alger that the writer grew up, in Belcourt, a poor neighborhood. He lived in this modest house. The new owner is proud to show off the view from the balcony he shares with the great writer. Camus himself admitted to being heavily influenced by his early years.
It was in this life of poverty, amongst the humble and the vain, that I most surely touched the sense of real life.
Fans of Camus often come to pay homage.
They come, they take photos, then thank you and goodbye. I offered to sell the place to the people from the French consulate, then they could make it into a museum dedicated to Albert Camus. They say, okay, and then they don't come back.
But there's one sore point in Albert Camus' relationship with the country, his stance on Algerian war. He remained silent while other writers struggled for independence.
Camus l'Algérien, moi, c'est une expression que je ne partage pas du tout. Voilà.
I can't say Camus was an Algerian, because he wasn't in favor of Algerian independence. Algeria only existed thanks to the blood spilled by its people. I much prefer to call him a French writer from Algeria.
Despite that, some still defend Camus' Algerian heritage.
Algeria's literary heritage is not only post-colonial. You can say that Saint Augustine is part of Algeria's cultural heritage, and so is the generation of colonial writers like Jean Pellegrini, Jacques Derrida, or Albert Camus. It's really up to us to claim them and make them part of this history. That's the fundamental thing.
Be it in Tipaza or Alger, Camus was often nostalgic for his country of birth. He wrote,
When I am far from this country, I think of its twilight, like the promise of happiness.
And that's the culture update today. Thanks for watching France 24. And with that, we're also wrapping up this morning's edition of The Morning Edition. Do join us again tomorrow. For now, though, stay with us. Hannah Hoxter will be back with more international news headlines and a news update in just a few moments. Don't go away.